Dura, demokrasya, hindi diktadura. Yes, I see everybody in the chat. Yes, please chant with me in your home, wherever you are here today, because we will struggle. The movement continues. We will not be afraid. So we're gathered here today because we know that on July 3rd, today, Duterte has signed the anti-terror bill into law, which will take effect in 15 days. So the Malaya movement, the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, Bayan USA have gathered today. All of you, over 425 participants now, for this online emergency protest so we can condemn this fascist move of Duterte. Tonight, we'll hear organizations speak out against the anti-terror law, what it means for us as Filipinos, and how we can collectively resist and take action. So together, we will show the Philippine government that Filipinos and their allies over here in the US are united against the anti-terror law, and we will not stand idly by. So please use the official hashtags junk terror law and share our live stream online. So to kick us off today, we are going to have our first speaker, Malaya Arevalo from the National Secretariat of Malaya Movement, and Bernadette Herrera, who is a Malaya Movement National Convener and the chairperson of Migrante USA. And so Malaya Movement is a broad movement of individuals and organizations in various formations united under the common objectives of defending human rights, democracy in the Philippines. The Migrante USA is an alliance of Filipino worker and migrant organizations dedicated to fighting for the rights and welfare of Filipinos in the US for genuine democracy and freedom in the Philippines. Warm welcome. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining today's emergency call to oppose this new anti-terror act. On behalf of the Malaya movement, I think it is clear that we condemn in the strongest possible terms this passage of Duterte's reprehensible anti-terror law that he just signed last night, that threatens to plunge the nation and Filipinos worldwide into an era that threatens our human rights, that threatens the practice of our civil freedoms, and attacks, once again, human rights defenders who have long been critical of Duterte's blood war, a bloody drug war, his continuous attacks on press freedom, and the crackdown he has made on opposition and dissent. This is happening all in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic and record-breaking unemployment rates, while Filipino families across the nation are struggling to put food on the table. We see that this is an example of Duterte's weak stomach for criticism and his bloodthirst for unquestioned power, that puts the health and wellness of Filipino people last on his list of priorities. Just a few days ago, the UN Human Rights Council held its 44th session, and Michelle Bachelet, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, raised real concerns about Duterte's overarching focus on public order and national security that she says is often at the expense of human rights, due process rights, the rule of law, and accountability. And this statement mirrors the sentiments of lawyers, legislators, and rights advocates in the Philippines and across the world who have shared their opposition to this anti-terror law. On behalf of the Malaya movement, we also recognize and do not separate ourselves from the real possibility of being targeted by the Duterte government for our own positions on his weak stance of sovereignty, these martial law era policies, and his insistence of constitutional reform that will only further his reign and those of the Philippine elite who have maintained political dynasties. We cannot forget the long history of Filipinos in the US who have been targeted, tortured, or killed for being critical of the tyranny and fascism of past Philippine governments. We know in 1981, labor leaders Silma Domingo and Jean Viernes were assassinated in Seattle, who were opposing Marcos' martial law. In 2009, while conducting human rights and community health work, Melissa Rojas was abducted, detained, and tortured for 6 days. And almost a year ago, in August of 2019, Brandon Lee, an SF native, journalist, and advocate for rights of indigenous people in the Cordilleras, was shot in front of his own home in Baguio after being red tagged and threatened by local elements of the AFP. Despite all of the broad concerns of the law's constitutionality from legislators and legal experts in the Philippines, and warnings against the law's threats to freedoms of expression, speech, privacy, association, or assembly from the international community of human rights organizations, Duterte has chosen to turn a deaf ear to reason. So Malaya movement asserts that if the people in power will not listen to reason, it is reasonable for the people to wield its power. We are calling on all of the Filipino people to once again bring reason and truth to President Duterte, as we have done so in the past with Marcos and Estrada. We must continue to oppose Duterte's anti-terror law. And again, I say, makibaka, wag matakot.
That's right. Maki baka wag matakot. Tama na, sobra na, aus Duterte na. And so Bernadette Herrera will speak. It will be in Tagalog, so we're going to enable the closed captioning for those of you who can't understand Tagalog. So let's see, is Bernadette here? We'll have to get her unmuted. Okay.
Yes. Isang malungkot at nakakagalit na gabi sa inyong lahat. Maraming salamat sa mabilis na pagtitipon. Kung titingnan natin, mahigit tayong kulang sa 500 ng mga dumalo. Maraming salamat sa mga dumalo na tumugon sa pangangailangan, natutulan at iprotesta ang walang hiyang pagpirma ni Duterte sa anti-terror law. Ako si Bernadette Herrera, isa sa mga convener ng Malaya Movement at isang migranteng Pilipino. Tama lang na magalit tayo sa kabastusan na ginawa ni Duterte. Isang kabastusan laban sa konstitusyon ng Pilipinas, isang kabastusan laban sa karapatang pangtao, higit sa lahat ay ang kabastusan sa mamamayang Pilipino. Sa panahon na nagugutom at walang makain ang mamamayang Pilipino, walang ayuda,
We're having some technical glitches. Bernadette, are you there? I think Bernadette is frozen. Bernadette, can you hear us? Hello, hello. Having a little bit of technical difficulties, but once Tita Bernadette is unfrozen, we will definitely get more of her words. But in the meantime, we'll do some chanting. So we all know this: when the people are united, we can never be defeated. So ang tao, ang bayan, nayon ay lumalaban, nayon ay lumalaban, ang tao, ang bayan. Yes, and we'll just practice while we're getting the internet back together. Junk, terror law, junk, terror law, junk, terror law, junk, terror law. Tama na, sobra na, aus Duterte na. Tama na, sobra na, aus Duterte na. Let's see if we can get Bernadette on. Okay, thank you.
And I'm just trying to get the chat for my restream of all this. That's what I'm being all busy.
Okay, Bernadette is back here.
Okay.
Bernadette, can you hear you?
Yes. Yeah. Do you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you now.
May problema sa internet. Anyway, sa panahong nagugutom at walang nakakain ng mamayang Pilipino, walang ayuda at mga namamatay sa pandemyang dulot ng COVID-19, ang inuna ni Duterte. Ang inuna ni Duterte ay ang pagkukonsolida sa kanyang kapangyarihan sa pamamagitan ng pagpasa sa anti-terror bill.
I'm not seeing the closed caption.
Kamigrante at kamanggagawa, tama na at sobra ng pambabastos at panggigipit. Nakikiisa ako sa panawagan ng mga kapwa kong migrante at manggagawa na panahon na upang kumilos, upang wakasan ang kaya hinikayat ko kayo.
All right, so evidently there's not any closed caption that I can pick up in this Zoom. I'm not sure why.
At sa diktadura ni Duterte. Itutuloy natin ang protesta hanggang sa July 27 para sa People's Zona. Mga kasama, mga kababayan na nakikinig ngayon, kung wala kayong mga organisasyon pumaloob kayo sa iba't ibang organisasyon na kung saan may pahayag natin ang mga nais nating karumal-dumal. Labanan natin ang mga ginagawa na hindi dapat sa Pilipinas. Makibaka, huwag matakot, ibasura ang anti-terror law, langsagin ang pasistang diktadura ni Duterte. Sumama tayo sa malakihang rally, lumabas tayo at magsalita at ipakita ang ating mga hinaing na hindi tayo natatakot sa ganitong mga ginagawa ng kasalukuyang gobyerno ni Duterte. Maraming salamat at magandang gabi sa inyong lahat.
Thank you so much to Malaya and Bernadette for those agitating speeches. Migrante ng bayan, ngayon
ay lumalaban.
Ngayon ay lumalaban. Migrante
ng bayan.
Right, yes. Protection, hindi collection. Okay, so next up on our speakers will be Drew Elizard Miller, who is the National Coordinator of the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, which is a coalition with over 40 member organizations and honorary individual members here in the United States. They aim to inform the international community about the grave human rights situation in the Philippines today and calls on all freedom-loving peoples, organizations, political parties, and governments all over the world to express their concern about the deteriorating human rights situation. So without further ado,
those are the hashtags to use if you're following this or you see it after the fact. Those are the hashtags. I put them in the chat. They can't hear me. I'm restreaming this.
Are you there?
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So as iChirp US, we are in solidarity with the Filipino people today in condemning and calling for the junking of the anti-terror bill. We've been working and organizing a campaign for nearly 2 years to end US support of the Duterte regime. And in this campaign, we are alarmed at the atrocity, but seeing that it's not random, but it's just another domino to fall in a long line of efforts to extend Duterte's militarist rule in the Philippines. And this is a move we want to be the last in it. Having provided over $550 million in military aid to Duterte since 2016, we are confronted with the question of what will it take for the US to end its direct support of Duterte. At first, there was Duterte's public challenging of Obama. There's been 30,000 killings, and yet that was not enough. There was martial law. There's the rest of the Time Person of the Year, the shutdown of the largest news provider in the Philippines. There's the widespread killings of peace activists. Is that not enough? Most recently, there's been Duterte's vacillation towards China. Is that not enough? There's been the termination of the visiting forces agreement with the US. And then there's been the order to shoot to kill violators of quarantine during COVID and a public health crisis. Is that not enough for the US to end military aid to the country? It is clear the cruelty and guilt of the Duterte regime are not up for debate. Yet none of these atrocities of Duterte could stop the US State Department from approving up to $1.5 billion in arms sales to the Philippines this last April. None of these issues have turned Duterte or Trump against each other, as Duterte has also just encouraged US citizens to vote for Trump after many times that Trump has supported Duterte. And tonight it is the eve of what is called Philippine-American Friendship Day. And for a long time, the US has called the Philippines a close friend. But let us not confuse friendship with colonialism, and let us not confuse relationships between governments as the same as the relationship between their people. As a solidarity organization and the US chapter of a global coalition for human rights in the Philippines, amid years of US intervention in the country, we as iChirp US uphold the right of Filipinos to struggle for self-determination, and we recognize that the Filipino people are decisive in their struggle for rights and national sovereignty. At the same time, the United States government has granted millions of dollars of aid, intelligence, and military training to Duterte, and we vehemently oppose this. We cannot bear to see another life taken by Duterte's terror, nor another dollar spent in the war against the Filipino people. Instead, let's take up genuine people-to-people friendship in the form of international solidarity that makes the anti-terror law the trigger to end US support for Duterte. As people in the United States, let us not be deceived to think issues of the Filipino people, the issues of state terrorism, state-sanctioned killings, mass surveillance, and a crackdown on press freedom and democracy, let us not think these are not our problems as well, and that we should not take on in common interest and advocacy. Let us not be deceived to view solidarity as a choice or just an extra action to take in our day, but let us view solidarity as a necessary and integral commitment in building just and lasting peace in our world. In recent days, the United Nations reported on the human rights situation in the Philippines, condemning the anti-terror bill and calling for international monitoring of the situation. This week, Representative Jan Schakowsky from Chicago initiated a letter to oppose the anti-terror bill. While repression increases in the Philippines, we also have opportunity to raise our level of organizing and solidarity to push for the implementation of the Philippine Human Rights Act, which calls for the suspension of military aid to the Philippines. We put out the call for more fervent organizing, to gain support of more unions, churches, and people's organizations to join the movement for the Philippine Human Rights Act. And it is through our organizing and people power alone that we will push US Congress to introduce and pass this bill. We cannot wait for another day for the Philippine Human Rights Act, and we must push for a sponsor to introduce it now. Side by side, let's advance the cause for justice in the Philippines and in the world. Activism is not terrorism, and true friendship means international solidarity.
Thank you, Drew, so much for demonstrating the importance of solidarity at this time. Solidarity is our best protection against the fascism and repression that we experience from here in the United States to the Philippines, to Palestine and around the world. So join me in another chant. We will say, no justice, no peace. Stop the killings in the Philippines. No justice, no peace. Stop the killings in the Philippines.
No justice,
thank you so much
no
to the
peace.
International Coalition
Stop
for
the
Human Rights
killing in the Philippines.
And if people want to learn more about the Philippine Human Rights Act, please visit humanrightsph.org and let us unite together to end our US tax dollars going to human rights violations in the Philippines. So for our next speaker, we will invite Rhonda Ramiro, who is the chair of Bayan USA, an overseas chapter of the Philippines-based Bagong Alyansang Makabayan, or the New Patriotic Alliance, a nationwide multi-sectoral alliance of over 1,000 grassroots people's organizations in the Philippines fighting for national and social liberation. Welcome, Rhonda.
Bring it, Rhonda.
Good evening, everybody. By now on this webinar, it's become so clear that no one is surprised that Duterte has exploited the COVID pandemic and this moment for his own benefit in order to railroad through Congress and now sign into law the anti-terror law. Bayan USA expected nothing different from Duterte because throughout his presidency, he has treated every issue, whether it is an issue of health or an issue of the country's economy, as an issue of control and repression. Duterte's opening salvo from the very beginning of his presidency 4 years ago was his war on drugs and Oplan Tokang that brutalized communities and resulted in the cold-blooded killing of upwards of 30,000 people, from primarily among the poor. And then soon thereafter, he moved on to the so-called ISIS terrorist threat that resulted in the destruction of the city of Marawi and imposition of Mindanao-wide martial law. And then Duterte relentlessly utilized a counter-terrorist...
I feel like a lot of people are going to have a difficult transition, especially people who didn't have summer...
And counterinsurgency
you guys are like ahead.
To go after activists, organizers, the media, and political opponents who voiced criticisms of Duterte's policies. He went after all who voiced criticisms of his policies. And what policies are we talking about? Policies that have protected the interests of his big business cronies at the expense of the poor, using neoliberal schemes like Build, Build, Build program to disguise billion-dollar mega construction and land reclamation deals as infrastructure projects, knowing full well that these stand to displace tens of thousands of poor people from their homes with little to no benefit for them. Policies that have used tools like the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion law or the train law, which cut taxes for the wealthiest while burdening the broad masses with onerous consumption taxes, resulting in higher prices on basic commodities that people need to survive, Policies that have prioritized the interests of multinational corporations that plunder Philippine land and resources and exploit Filipino workers in dangerous sweatshops. Policies that have put the interests of the US military and the interests of China's investments over the national sovereignty and patrimony of our country. Policies like the enhanced community quarantine, which has imprisoned people in their homes while giving little to no resources for COVID testing, healthcare for the sick, or financial sustenance for people who are unable to work. And now proposals like the DOF's Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, or CREATE, which would grant huge corporations the biggest corporate tax breaks in the country's history, resulting in drastically slashing revenues at a time when they are so needed. So every step of the way over the past 4 years, the people have resisted Duterte's retrogressive, reactionary, and fascist policies. They have opposed his iron fist, even at great risk to their freedom, as we see with the prisons filled with activists jailed on trumped-up charges, and even with their lives, as we see with the thousands who have been killed in his 3 wars on the people. It was only a matter of time before Duterte would enact such a sweeping law as the ATL in an attempt to crush dissent once and for all. But the people aren't standing for it. From the moment it was introduced, the ATB and now the ATL has been vehemently opposed by every corner of Philippine society. The Filipino people are saying enough is enough. We're ready to resist and junk this illegitimate law. We're saying enough is enough of the fascist Duterte and everything he stands for. We're saying enough is enough of Duterte's continued subservience to foreign domination by imperial interests of the US and China and to the interests of the landed elite of the Philippines, which has stunted the overall economic, political, and social development of the Philippines. We are saying yes to junking the ATL, to allow for the freedom of dissent, the freedom to chart a new course that departs from business as usual as represented by Duterte, one that charts a new course for real land reform, for our own large-scale national industries, for an independent foreign policy, and for a self-sufficient economy that does not rely on exporting both products and people in order to keep the economy afloat. We want to chart a new course that prioritizes the development of a public health system that provides quality, needed, and accessible health services for all, rather than only the tiny few who can afford it. One that does not criminalize those who dare to dream, who dare to dissent, and who dare to resist. Bayan USA, as an overseas chapter of Bayan, doesn't think this is an if or a pipe dream. It's something real that we can achieve as long as we continue to organize and fight for it. Even when this anti-terror law comes into effect in 15 days, the people will continue to fight the US Duterte regime and the rotten system that it represents. If the history of the Filipino people has proven anything, it is that dictators have never determined the destiny of our country. Rather, they've only expedited the people's struggle for genuine democracy and social change. So today, the first step is to continue galvanizing the people to junk the anti-terror law, and then furthermore, to remove the fascist Duterte from office. Bayan USA hopes that you'll join us in our call to oust Duterte.
Thank you so much, Rhonda of Bayan USA. It was so beautifully put that, right, dictators don't determine the future of the Filipino people. It is the people themselves, and that they are really clamoring for economic change, systemic change, not terrorism and fascism at the hands of the state. So junk, junk, junk terror law, junk, junk, junk terror law. Tama na, sobra na, oust Duterte na. Tama na, sobra na, oust Duterte na.
And my apologies
Thank
for
you
not
so
getting,
much,
not
everybody,
getting
for
this
chanting
screen
in your
quite
wherever
right
you're watching
before.
the online
Took me a
rally
minute, but
today
I got
in
it.
the chat. So next, we're going to hear a speak out from different community organizations.
Great.
So first up, we will have Irma Shafbahar, the chairperson of Gabriela USA, which is an overseas chapter of Gabriela National Alliance in the Philippines, of Women in the Philippines, a grassroots-based alliance of more than 200 organizations, institutions, desks, and programs of women all over the Philippines, seeking to wage a struggle for the liberation of all oppressed Filipino women and the Filipino people. So welcome, Irma Shafbahar.
Irma.
Thanks so much, Julie. And
Hey,
thank you, everyone, for taking time to be here tonight. Hi, everyone. My name is Irma Shapahar, and I'm the current national chairperson of Gabriela USA, a national alliance of Filipino women's organizations fighting for the rights of Filipino women and children and for the liberation of the Philippines. Gabriela USA condemns the enactment of the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020. The Duterte regime has committed many fascist acts against Filipino women, children, LGBTQ plus communities, and the rest of the Filipino people. Gabriela recently campaigned for the release of the Pride 20, who were violently dispersed and unjustly arrested while commemorating International Pride Month. The Pride 20's right to peaceful assembly was violated, and the Philippine National Police did not even inform them of any violation they had been committed at the time of the arrest, showing that the anti-terror law is paving the way for arbitrary and unlawful arrest. Under COVID-19, Duterte attempted to implement the enhanced community quarantine and gave no aid to families, and they were all forced to stay at home. The people are forced to leave their homes because they are hungry and they need assistance. The Filipino people have been slapped with accusations and violence because they criticized Duterte for not doing his duty to provide assistance and look after the welfare of the people. The enactment of the anti-terror law will only serve the interests of Duterte's macho fascist regime, continuing repression and violence on the Filipino people who are clamoring for their health, their livelihood, and their basic rights. This law will give way to continue Duterte's brutal war on the poor. How many more economic policies like the train law that increases the prices on basic commodities for poor and working class families must the Filipino people face? How many more children will be lost in the crossfire of Duterte's drug war? With their official response to grieving mothers that shit happens, how many more indigenous women and children and families will be displaced by militarization in our ancestral lands in the Philippines? How many more women will be murdered like our trans sibling Jennifer Lade, who was violently murdered at the hands of the US military occupying de facto US bases in the Philippines? How many more mothers, daughters, sisters, aunties, titas will be forced to leave their families and their children to find work abroad just to survive? We must build our collective resistance and fight against Duterte's fascism that continues to attack our Filipino people. We must condemn this repressive regime that silences those who speak out against his fascist rule. We must not be afraid. We must resist and build and organize against the anti-terror law and demand mass testing, healthcare, and aid for our families in the Philippines and our Filipino people. Gabriela USA calls on all women and our allies all over the world to join the Filipino people's mass movement to oust Duterte once and for all. Tama na! Enough is enough. Sulong, Gabriela! Lumaban makibaka!
Thank you so much, Irma of Gabriela USA. We know that women and gender oppressed people are always at the forefront of the tyranny and oppression of the Philippine fascist government. So we will reiterate Gabriela's chant, Sulong, Gabriela, lumaban maki baka, lumaban maki baka, Sulong, Gabriela. Enough is enough. So we stand up with our women and gender oppressed people around the world and in the Philippines. So next up on our speaker list, we're going to invite Naida Castro of NEFCON Inland Empire, which is the National Ecumenical Forum for Filipino Concerns in the Inland Empire, or NEFCON IE, an organization comprising of people of the faith who believe in the dynamic presence and integration of Filipinos and Filipino Americans in the US churches and society. So welcome to our online rally. Let's get Naida Castro on the floor. Naida, are you there?
Hi, thank you for this opportunity. The National Ecumenical Forum for Filipino Concerns has 3 chapters here in California, one in North Cal, South Cal, and the Inland Empire. It is an organization of people of faith inspired by the love of God and service to the people. where faith is seen as a river of life that nurtures legitimate struggles and interhuman relationships. Because we are people of faith, NAFCON is in full accord with the express wrongdoings of the anti-terror bill and its perils to the Filipino people's fundamental, human, constitutional, and civil rights. It is mind-blowing, frightening, and reprehensible that this anti-terror bill has now been signed, freely giving the Anti-Terrorism Council full power of government, not only executive but judicial, to identify who are terrorists and what are terrorist organizations without due process. It is by itself terrorism, and we cannot stop the fight. We cannot imagine that we can be accused and be imprisoned based on allegations that we are terrorists just because we joined an exposure program to provide medical, dental, and other healthcare needs to our poor brothers and sisters in the remote areas in the Philippines, no matter who they are or what they represent. We cannot imagine that we can be identified as terrorists because we are living our faith and fighting structural causes of poverty. We cannot imagine church leaders or any religious institutions to be accused of being terrorists or terrorist organizations for living the gospel values of loving and providing sanctuaries for the poor. We cannot imagine being accused of terrorism because we are speaking out against oppression, against forced displacement and migration, against human trafficking, against drugs, war, and violence. We cannot imagine a world like this. We cannot imagine being accused of terrorism because we are advocating for the rights of the poor, the marginalized, and the indigenous, for equality, employment, and for basic human rights to land, clean water, food, and housing. We cannot imagine living in the United States but still be accused of being terrorists because we are fighting for the rights of our brothers and sisters in the Philippines. To this date, there are many who still believe in the separation of church and politics. But according to the social doctrine of the church, politics is one of the highest forms of charity because it serves the common good. In closing, NEFCON says, people of faith need to meddle in politics for the good of all peoples. Let us work in solidarity with all grassroots movements of hope. Know that what we do for the people of God are sacred rights. Do not fear, says the Lord. Makibaka tayo at huwag matakot. Mabuhay ang Pilipino. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Naida of NEFCON IE. We must say, makibaka wag matakot. We cannot be afraid. And today really shows the unity of all of us here today from all walks of life, regardless if you are from the church, you're a student, you advocate for women's rights, humans' rights, migrant rights. We are here together in unison to say, junk the terror law, oust Duterte, enough is enough of Duterte's tyranny and fascism. So, makibaka wag matakot.
Makibaka wag matakot.
That's right. Thank you so much. So up next, we will have Ms. Loida Lewis of U.S. Pinoys for Good Governance. She is a Filipino-American community leader, businesswoman, philanthropist, and formerly a general attorney in the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service. She is the national chair of U.S. Pinoys for Good Governance, an organization advocating for good governance, transparency, integrity, and sovereignty in the Philippines. Warm welcomes to Ms. Loida Lewis.
Can you hear me now? Thank you. Thank you very much, Julie. And to Malaya for organizing this virtual rally. Because when Duterte signed this anti-terror law Friday in the Philippines, it really is the formal start of the declaration of martial law in the Philippines. We are now again under martial law. And this anti-terror bill, that is now anti-terror law, is really terrorism. It's the beginning of terrorism by the government of Duterte. Why is that? It's the beginning of the reign of terror because now not only suspected drug dealers and drug users are being arrested or killed, but anybody who criticizes Duterte and or any of his minions, his department heads, any part of the government that is corrupt, anybody can be picked up, arrested, imprisoned without due process and for a long time. And therefore, the imprisonment of Senator Leila de Lima will now be commonplace. And so our poor Filipinos are so scared that it will trump down really any form of criticism, I'm afraid. And so all of us here in the United States, Filipino Americans, it has been said, yes, attend rallies like this, but more so, let us write to our congressmen and senators. And since this is election year in the Philippines, in the United States, please, I am campaigning for Joe Biden because this election, we should kick out the rascal that we have in the White House, who is pro-Duterte, pro-Putin of Russia, pro-China of Xi Jinping. And I'm sad to say, aside from being a martial law in the Philippines, we are also under, Duterte has also said in a Filipino-Chinese Friendship Association gala that the Philippines is now a province of China. And so what can we do? All we can do is, yes, agitate here in the Philippines before our Congress, before our senators and congressmen. And most of all, we just have to pray to God to have mercy on our country. And because if it is His will, to put an end to the reign of Duterte. Lord, have mercy. Maraming salamat.
Thank you so much, Tita Loida. Right, with the passing of the anti-terror law, we are seeing not only de facto martial law, but it really is martial law incarnate. So we say, never again, never again, never again to martial law, never again, never again, never again to martial
law.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And so up next, we are going to have a series of incredible speakers from the youth and student sector who really bear the bright future of our Filipino people. So we are excited to welcome Mia Elaine, who is a member of the Philippine Cultural Society of George Washington University. Let's get Mia unmuted. Okay. Mia, are you there?
Good evening. My name is Mia, and I am a university student in Washington, D.C., where I am a member of Kabataan Alliance, and I am privileged to be speaking out today against the anti-terror bill, and I'd like to demonstrate all of my gratitude to the organizers of this action. I was actually able to speak the other day at an emergency action in front of the Philippine Embassy in D.C. At that moment, we thought there was still a sliver of time before the anti-terror bill became a law. But after waking up to today's horrific news, this truly has become an emergency. I'm a student leader at my university in Washington, D.C., and I speak not only for my organization, but to every other Filipino student organization here in the United States and abroad. What is the point of celebrating our culture each year at cultural nights and dance showcases if our fellow students, family, and citizens in the Philippines are endangered by severe obstacles? This includes, but is not limited to, extreme poverty, colorism, imperialism, colonialism, fascism, COVID-19 due to weak policies, and now this anti-terror law, which will criminalize dissenting opinions against the Philippine government. While it is not wrong to celebrate our culture, this means we should do our due diligence by paying close attention to what is going on in the homeland and act appropriately. In this dire situation, that means rising up and mobilizing to support those from where our heritage comes from. As youth and students, we are the future, and it is of the utmost importance that we take the privileges and advantages we have to act out against injustices, whether it be here or in the homeland. The youth are the future, and we look down upon this bill in disgust and in fear that it will be used against innocents who want their voices to be heard, just like mine. Tens of thousands of Filipinos have already been slain by Duterte's hand, and we are obligated to do what we can to prevent any more unconstitutional arrests or murders. As a university student in the nation's capital, I am very privileged to be able to use my voice to speak out against these terrible injustices and human rights abuses. I call on the Filipino and Filipino-American youth to put aside our differences to do the same and unite in this paramount fight for people's rights. Makibaka, wag matakot.
Makibaka, wag matakot. Thank you so much, Mia, for your incredible speech and calling all of the students across the United States to unite against our differences in support of the Filipino people against tyranny and fascism. Thank you so much. So next up, we are going to have Valerie Francisco Menchavez of the Critical Filipino Studies Collective. She is an assistant professor of sociology. Dr. Francisco's academic interests include global and transnational sociology, migration and immigration studies, diaspora with a special interest on the Philippine migration, gender and the family, racial and ethnic relations in the US, labor, transnational social movements with regard to migrant workers and international political economy. So let's give it up for our academics who are speaking out. Welcome, Valerie.
Thank you, Julie, and the organizers of this online action. My name is Valerie Francisco Menchavez. I am an associate professor at San Francisco State University, and I am part of the Critical Filipinx Studies Collective. Scholars, educators, researchers all over the United States, and we are definitely concerned about the anti-terror law being passed. Many scholars, students, all the way from undergraduate to graduate to faculty members and researchers and scholars really see that dissent has been a constitutional right of Filipinos in the Philippines and here in the United States. Many of us research the importance of dissent and social movements as a part of the robust democracy of the streets in the Philippines. In this anti-terror law, we understand that scholar activists and activists who are making sense of the world and making sense of political struggle and producing political theory about that are on the lines. Professors like Sarah Raimundo in the Philippines in the past who have been red baited for teaching factual, historical, sociological, and political scholarship will be continued to be red baited and just victimized under this anti-terror law. And so many of us, like myself, many other scholars and educators in CFSC are also scholars and teachers and activists who are trying to make connections around the importance of transnational activism between the United States and the Philippines, and in fact, between the Philippines and wherever Filipinos are all over the globe. Many scholars are condemning this anti-terror law as not just an attack on human rights, on civil rights, of the people in the Philippines, but it's also an attack on academic freedoms of scholars like us who are putting at the center of our scholarship the importance of movement building scholarship, movement building research, and movement building period. So many of us want to tell the government in the United States, here in the United States, that cutting military aid to the Philippines is one way to condemn this anti-terror law. We are demanding the Rodrigo Duterte and the Philippine government to strike this law, and we stand in solidarity with so many sectors who have spoken today here in the US and in the Philippines, more importantly, to really strike this anti-terror law down. We believe that it will take all Filipinos in the country and outside of it. We have no more options. We have no choice but to act. We have no reason why not to join forces, expose Rodrigo Duterte for the fascist dictator that he is, and restore grassroots democracy in the Philippines as it should be, belonging to the Filipino people. Iskolar ng bayan ngayon ay lumalaban.
Scholar ng bayan ngayon ay lumalaban. Scholar ng bayan ngayon ay lumalaban. Thank you so much, Valerie. As we know, in the anti-terror law that recently passed, that the mere intent to incite terrorism could be considered a terrorist act. The important work that journalists do, academics, writers, artists, the things that they use to expose the real conditions in the Philippines could be considered an act of terrorism. And we say no to this. Defend, defend, defend democracy. Rise, resist, unite against Duterte's tyranny. All right, and so we're nearing the end of our program of speakers. We have 3 left, and then we are going to leave you with some amazing calls to action, because we don't just mobilize for these online platforms. We are mobilizing so that we can unite together and move to a place of action to enact genuine change. So up next, our next speaker will be Edwin Carlos of the Community Action and Dialogue Chairperson of Northern California Filipinx Student Alliance, or NC-PASA. NC-PASA strives to create a safe space where Filipinx and Phil-Am collegiate and students can feel empowered through cultural, community, political, and social events. Warm welcomes to Edwin. The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Julie, and thank you, Malaya, for putting this together. So yeah, my name is Edwin Carlos, the Community Action and Dialogue Chairperson for the Northern California Filipinx American Students Alliance, and we condemn the anti-terror law. This law has implications on how Filipinx American student groups can support the movements and efforts in the Philippines. Student groups regularly fundraise for relief efforts in the Philippines, have students go on immersion trips to the homeland to integrate with local communities, and have workshops and statements that speak out against what the Philippine government does to its people, especially as it relates to the Filipinx diaspora. This bill would stifle our ability to use our positions as members of the diaspora to support those in the Philippines. The United States has a long and oppressive relationship with the Philippines, and we have a role as Filipinx Americans to address that relationship. However, some worries exist, particularly in the Northern California area, around the Philippine National Police Outpost on the 2nd floor of the SF consulate. Amid the calls to abolish police departments all across the United States, we also call for the Philippine National Police to leave the SF consulate, as we know that this bill allows for more surveillance of the organizing and activism that our communities do. We can't allow this government and this bill to scare us into being apolitical. We can't let Duterte continue to repeat the martial law that our parents may have experienced under Marcos. We need to take a stand and say that activism is not terrorism. And in fact, laws like these are the ones that terrorize the Filipinx people. As Community Action and Dialogue Chairperson for NC-PASA, we call for U.S. legislators, especially in the NorCal area, to condemn the bill, for community members to rally against a $2 billion arms deal between the U.S. and the Philippines, and for students to come together in community to junk the anti-terror law. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edwin. Carlos of NC Pasa. Makibaka, wag matakot, junk, 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 terror law, junk, 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 terror law. Wonderful. Okay, so our next speaker we're going to invite is Kenneth Cravillo of Kabataan Alliance, which is a national alliance of Filipino youth and student organizations dedicated to serving our communities in the US and back home in the Philippines and advocating for their rights and welfare. Welcome, Kenneth. The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Kabataan Alliance is a national alliance of over 40 Filipino and Filipino American youth and student alliances, organizations, and individuals from across the U.S. And we are honored to be with all the good people out here tonight, condemning the passing of the anti-terror law by Rodrigo Duterte. When I woke up this morning, and usually when I wake up, I'm usually groggy and sleepy, but I woke up, picked up my phone, and I saw that it was passed. I woke up fully functioning brain, eyes wide open, and I was shocked, concerned, but most of all, angry. I'm angered, like all of us here, by the passing of this law. Angered that Duterte continues to only make the lives of our kababayan harder, of our families back home harder, suffocating them more and more by taking away their dignity and their rights, and especially exponentially in the last 6 months. First, not providing healthcare and mass testing and relief for the people for the pandemic, and instead implementing a militaristic martial law-like response, to now passing a bill which allows anyone that shares any criticism or frustration and calling them a terrorist. And like Kabataan Alliance, we do mission trips, relief work, environmental justice work, indigenous support work in the Philippines. And that type of work would be now under this law would be implicated as being, we would be called terrorists or terrorist sympathizers. Is helping the poor, is supporting Typhoon or Taal survivors terrorism? Because to me, in my view, the Duterte government is causing more terrorism on the people right now. These responses that the Duterte government has done won't solve the problem of our kababayan. We've been there. We've been on these trips. People are starving. People are poor. People want land. People want education, healthcare, jobs, and they want to be united with their families. There's OFW still stranded out there in the airports and they still can't get home. And the people want a government that isn't corrupt. People want action. And so for us in Kabataan Alliance, we stand firmly with our kababayan back home and will continue to educate our Filipino community members, youth and older, on the issues back home. And we'll continue to push for unity and getting more Filipino youth and student orgs to condemn the passing of this law and work side by side with all the wonderful, beautiful organizations out here like Malaya, iChirp, Anagbayan, Gabriela, and everybody else that's on this call, Migrante, Vaya, DEFCA, FGG, Etsy Pasa, you all look good, and many more of us, so that we can get more unity and continue to find ways to take action together by writing statements, social media actions, TikTok dances, pushing the passing of the Philippine Human Rights Act here in the US, and mobilizing in the streets and serving our communities and condemn the dictator-like actions against the people alongside all of you. Not just with our kababayan here, but our kababayan back home, facing the brunt of this madman and this militaristic government's machinations against them. And we are calling on all Filipino youth here to take a stance to not be afraid. In the midst of repression, we hope that resistance grows at the same time. And our history shows us that we've overcome and defeated dictators in the past, and this will be no different. In a moment like this and it is moments like this where history is made, and Filipino youth and students have a role to play. Black Eyed Peas had a song 2 years ago called Yes or No, and William said, pick a side, pick a side, pick a side. And we say no to the terror law, human rights violations, martial law like laws and dictatorship, and yes to democracy and human rights and mass testing, food, land, and livelihood for our kababayan. And for us in Kabataan Alliance, we say the time is right more than ever to pick the side of the people. Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay ang Pilipino. Kabataan, unite, fight for people's rights. Thank you.
That's right. Kabataan, unite, fight for people's rights. And when the people are united, we can never be defeated. So ang tao, ang bayan, nayon ay lumalaban, nayon ay lumalaban, ang tao, ang bayan. Yes, thank you all so much for joining us here today. We have We've had consistently over 500 people participate in this online rally. So everybody should be so proud of yourselves for showing up and taking action. We are gonna have our last speaker of our Speak Out today. I'm gonna invite Nikki Pagulayan, the National Education Officer of Anak Bayan USA, which is a national Filipino youth organization that arouses, organizes, and mobilizes youth to achieve national democracy in the Philippines. So welcome, Nikki, the floor is yours. Just gonna get her unmuted.
Thank you, Julie. Can people hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Hello again. My name is Nikki Pagulayan and I am with Anak Bayan USA. Thank you all to the 500 plus people here today on this very sobering moment in the fight against
We see each other quite
dictatorship.
often in the streets
And
here in
I'm
New
here
York
to
City.
say that the hundreds of Anak Bayan USA members across the country condemn in the highest form Duterte's signing of the anti-terror bill into law, which will only worsen the existing political repression against Filipinos across the world and deem all dissent against the Duterte government as acts of terrorism. We must acknowledge at this point in time that Filipino youth and students at home and overseas are hard hit by this law's potentially long-lasting effects, as we are on the front lines against Duterte's dictatorship and the struggle for national democracy. From the working youth who strike for better wages and working conditions, to the urban youth, poor youth who fight for basic necessities such as food and housing, the indigenous youth defending their ancestral land against corporate development, the peasant youth who fight for their right to till the land, all the Filipino youth overseas who decisively see ourselves as integral to waging the struggle of our homeland, and the many youth who give up their lives in order to take up arms because they see no other choice in fighting for our freedom. I want us to take a moment to imagine the Philippines that we need to build. Imagine a Philippines where our natural resources belong to us and not to any foreign power or company that impedes on our ancestral lands. Imagine a Philippines where Filipinos are not forced overseas because of landlessness and joblessness, and no longer are treated as global commodities and cash cows for economic crisis. Imagine a Philippines that is genuinely democratic, where our land and resources didn't belong to a select few, but to the majority of our people. Imagine a Philippines with an economy that is self-reliant and not dependent on any foreign power, that does not have to compromise its sovereignty just to stuff the pockets of bureaucrat capitalists. And imagine a Philippines where our basic rights and civil liberties are simply respected and upheld. That is our role as youth. It is doing everything in our power to turn this vision of the Philippines into a reality. And so I have to ask, how does Duterte plan to flatten the revolutionary movement when it's been over 3 centuries of colonization, of occupation and imperialism that has produced one of the most vibrant mass movements in the world and the longest running people's war in all of Asia? We have nothing to fear and everything to fight for. So we must find hope in the mass movement led by the working class that will pave the course of our people's history. We must channel our rage and our love for our people at this time towards building organizations that can wield people power to its fullest capacity. So we call today on all Filipino youth and students overseas to channel our revolutionary legacy of a people who overthrew Spanish colonization, who struggled against Japanese and US occupation, who's ousted dictators, struggles where youth were always at the forefront. So we must embrace being part of one of the most vibrant mass movements in the world that is genuinely building an alternative to this current system that Duterte has done us the gracious favor of showing that it is obsolete. So we must take on the legacy of the people who came before us, people who fought for our lives even before we were born. May we take on the revolutionary task as Filipino youth to not only junk the anti-terror law, not only even destroy this rotten system that Duterte represents, but to imagine and build the socialist alternative that our people have tirelessly and painstakingly given their lives for. So for all the Filipinos and our allies across the US, we call on you to join Anak Bayan or other organizations and alliances here to solidify the people's unity to topple Duterte's dictatorship once and for all. We call on everyone here tonight to join us for the National Day of Action on July 8th, and then the People's State of the Nation address on July 27th, as we continue to build the mass movement that will deal the final blow needed to ensure Duterte's downfall. Junk the anti-terror law, oust the U.S. Duterte regime, makibaka para sa pambansang demokrasya, labang kabataan. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Nikki Pagulayan of Anakbayan USA. Makibaka, wag matakot. Makibaka, wag matakot. Junk, junk, junk terror law. Junk, junk, junk terror law. All right, so we've reached the end of our speakers, but we do know we want everybody to stick around because this part is really, really important. It is our calls to action. We have mobilized here today in unity. So many different sectors of organizations, of society have been represented today to really highlight the grave impacts on Filipino people that once this law fully lapses in 15 days and gets enacted, that the attacks, the killings, the repression of free speech, of our democratic rights, the increase of political prisoners, none of these tactics will really solve the root of the problems in the Philippines. It won't solve our COVID crisis that we're currently dealing with. All the Filipino people are experiencing is mass hunger, mass arrest, mass terror, but there are still no mass testing. There are still no mass solutions to the economic crisis in the Philippines or the trampling of our Philippine sovereignty. So thank you all for coming together in unison. And we know that if we look through Philippine history, that the Filipino people, when they enact their people power, that we can oust dictators, that we can enact the change that we really want to see, a free Philippines, free of tyranny and oppression. So if you can hit the next slide. So these are our calls to action. Please share these widely. We have had over 500 people attend today, so share with 5, 10 people. These calls to actions are something that anybody can join. And just to preface, Malaya Movement, before the passing of the anti-terror law, we launched our national week of resistance versus the anti-terror bill. So we're altering it a little bit, but please do visit our toolkit. We'll be regularly updating it with our updates now that it's passed and written into law. So please visit tinyurl.com/resistterrorbill for our toolkit, and you can see the day-to-day actions that we'll have throughout the week. So first, as anybody here, you can join the National Day of Action to condemn the anti-terror law on July 8th. We're calling for widespread condemnation, hold actions in front of your local Philippine consulate or the Philippine embassy if you're out in the DMV area. Please inform us if you're holding actions. We'd love to highlight anything. It could be small actions, large actions, outreach in your community. Please call your US legislators. And we have 2 asks for them. We want them to publicly denounce the anti-terror bill through a tweet, using hashtag #JunkTerrorLaw, through a social media post, and at maximum have them write an official condemnation statement. Inform them about the Philippine Human Rights Act, our campaign to cut US aid to Philippine security forces until such a time that it can be deemed that no human rights violations are happening in the Philippines and people are held accountable. This is really an action that not only Filipinos can take, but non-Filipinos. These are our tax dollars that are going to these human rights violations. And please, if you are working with legislators in your communities, we need somebody a bold legislator to really co-sponsor this bill and ensure this gets passed in Congress. Next slide, please. And sign and organize different petition drives in your community. This is such an easy way to do outreach and to get as many people involved in the movement. We still have the Junk Terror Law petition up on our Action Network website. And you can also share and hold petition drives for the Philippine Human Rights Act petition. The links are here, tinyurl.com/junkterrorlawnow or tinyurl.com/PHRA petition. And, use Junk Terror Law hashtag and speak out on all the platforms you can. write organizational statements, open letters to artists, academics, maybe you're in a particular field, register your opposition, get social media influencers, community leaders, and organizations to use their platform to speak out against the anti-terror law. I do know that we have a few influencers here and amazing artists from our community. Ruby Ibarra has plugged in. We are asking everybody for their help in exposing the anti-terror law and protecting our Filipinos in the Philippines once this gets enacted, and also us, right? There are particular parts in the law that calls out to Philippine foreign nationals, or even if you are a citizen of another country that goes to the Philippines to commit quote unquote terrorist acts, you are under the jurisdiction of the anti-terror law. And again, we know in anticipation, it already happened before the law has even lapsed into, the bill has lapsed into becoming a law. The Pride 20 is an example. This is what we for sure will see and expect under the anti-terror law now that it's passed. More crackdowns on dissent, on activism, mass arrests, even warrantless arrests up to 24 days, well beyond the guaranteed 3 days that is guaranteed in the Constitution. So in anticipation of this, we really want to support human rights defenders on the ground in the Philippines. So if you can donate, the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines set up this PayPal. So you can go to PayPal and donate to BethanySFPP@gmail.com. We'll send out all these calls to action, but please, we know bail money costs a lot, defense and legal fees cost a lot. We've seen that with what happened to Rappler and Maria Ressa. They're really trying to bankrupt people so that into inaction. And we also know that mass testing costs a lot. In the Philippines, 8,000 pesos. It costs 8,000 pesos for testing for COVID. Next slide, please. So many calls to action.
So
but
I'm
one
not
of the
catching
most
the slides
important
for
things
some
is that
reason.
we get
They're
organized,
controlling
we
the Zoom
organize
meeting.
our people power.
I don't
so
see the
please join
slides.
any of the sponsoring organizations here today. I don't think I ever introduced myself, but I'm Julie from Malaya Movement, the National Secretariat. So please join us in Malaya Movement. Our contact info is here. You can join the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines or a member organization of Bayan USA. It's a multi-sectoral alliance. So whether you're women, students, youth, please join, get organized, any of these organizations. Next slide, please.
I'm not catching the slides at all. I don't know
Yes,
what's
and
up.
then there are many upcoming events that we're going to flash on the screen, and especially want to highlight that Migrante International and the National Union of People's Lawyers will be holding a webinar on the anti-terror law now for overseas Filipinos. So please tune into that. That's this Sunday, July 5th. If you're an artist, you want to submit some Aus Duterte art submissions, you can go to tinyurl.com/AusDuterteArt. And next slide, please.
How am I not seeing any of this?
And there's a bunch of different Malaya events and iChirp events coming up. We're in many different regions all across the country. So please, you can screenshot these events. We'll send them out on our listserv. And I think an important event to highlight for iChirp is there's an all members unity call July 4th. That's tomorrow, 1 p.m. Pacific time or 4 p.m. Eastern time. So iChirp members, tune in for this all members unity meeting. And I think it is the final slide. Yes. So may we leave here tonight with fervor, with restored energy, because it is a long road ahead, but we can do it all together with our people power. So remember, makibaka, wag matakot, Aus Duterte now, and junk the terror law. Let's take a group picture before we head out. So if we could stop the screen share, let's get, if you feel comfortable, please turn on your camera. We have, on my computer, it's 19 pages of people, so many people. So we're gonna try to get some screenshots. Okay, I'm just gonna start going. So feel free, raise your fists. All right.
Oh, really? I could turn my camera on, I guess.
I'm only on page 6. keep your fists up. Oh my gosh, we're almost there. There's gonna be a few more. All right. I think we had it. Thank you all so much. We will send you our calls to action, and makibaka, wag matakot. Thanks for tuning in.
Solidarity from New York City. All right, let me nice. What do we do? The stop video. There we go. I did not realize that my little artwork, DJ Lennon, what is to be spun, was showing up in the Zoom meeting. I thought it was going to be just the people who were speaking, and that the people who were there wouldn't have their cameras on. Anyway. So I just found out about this. About a half hour before it started. I had read about it earlier in the day when I woke up, and so I had read about it, but I didn't know if it was. I didn't quite know if it was real or not. Like, I didn't recognize the newspaper that the headlines were in, and it looked legitimate, but I didn't know. It could have been, the equivalent of the National Enquirer for all I knew. So I figured I'd wait until I started hearing from some Filipino allies and comrades, and then I started to see on social media everyone posting about it. So I kept an eye on it, and we had dinner, and my wife and I, we had dinner, and then we were gonna go for a walk. I was gonna take a break from being online, take a walk, enjoy ourselves a little bit, and then come back and start a stream about midnight and do midnight to 4. That was the plan, at least. Obviously, that plan got totally derailed. Hang on, I'm trying to move some things here. Hang on a second. Well, you don't have to hang on. I'm just doing this. I'll figure it out. I will figure it out. But anyway, so it's kind of changed my plans for the evening. Right? So I don't even know what I should be doing. Like, should I what is to be spun? Exactly. I guess I said that, didn't I? So I don't even know if should I just end this stream and keep it? Maybe what I'll do is this. I'll end this stream. We'll just keep it as its own separate entity, make a highlight of it so it'll be in the archives. I'll go check in with the family. And then the plan is to be back, what is this, 9 o'clock? You saw something trending on Twitter, but you weren't sure? Yeah, well, that was the thing. When I just saw like a photocopy, picture of a headline from a newspaper that was in English, an English language newspaper, but it was from the Philippines, and that was the headline. The everybody I don't like's a terrorist law, and you know how like on social media, Facebook, Twitter, etc. There's the outrage of the day. There's the trolling and the yes, there's a headline and it sounds horrible, but when you really look into the story, it's a nothing burger. So I didn't want to be one of those people that just shared it right away just because I saw it and it made me mad. It didn't surprise, it's not surprising that it's real, but I waited until some folks, because I know obviously I know some movement people from the Philippines. So I waited until I started seeing their posts about it. And then when this, they organized this Zoom call and put it up, I don't know, maybe 2 hours ago. So I think I probably missed the first 3 or 4 minutes because I was still trying to get my Zoom, not my Zoom, but trying to get my OBS up and running and get the right graphic or whatever. So because I'm still kind of new on all of this. But anyway, I don't know. Part of me says we should just end this stream and then I'll come back in a few hours because I need to I need to get ready for that, and I need to go check on my family. But Francis, thank you for coming by. I don't know that we've talked before. Francis 36 Fagelli. But anyway, thanks for coming by. Maybe you'll come back again tonight or some other time. But I think it's best just to keep this short by itself, because when I like tonight, I'm going to be going off into all different other directions. We've got a situation happening up at Mount Rushmore. Indigenous folks have blocked some of the roads leading in. Thousands of people have bought tickets to go see the fireworks with President Trump. And the stormtroopers were called in and were attacking people. Anyway, so I've been following that. I've got clips and some live feeds that I want to look at. And then there's just other things as well. Basically, you know, as my stream takes shape, it's all going to be movement struggle stuff. I just don't know exactly how I'm going to structure it yet. So right now I'm just making it up as I go along. But anyway, so thank you for coming by. And maybe you'll drop by again either tonight or some other night. I should be on a few times a week. All right. Good night. All power to the people. All power to the people. All power to the people.